Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Let's talk about math and Final Fantasy X-2. Okay, so when it comes to Final Fantasy X-2, it's a direct sequel to Final Fantasy X. And it's pretty fun. And so I'm going to talk about why that is throughout this, and I'm going to focus in on the gameplay and talk about how math is used throughout Final Fantasy X too, as well as my opinions about it as we go. Like I said, I personally think it's fun, and I want to get into the why as we progress. It also talk about the story and the characters and some other things. So like spoilers ahead, because I don't intend to hold back. I don't realistically think I'm gonna get into anything too heavy in terms of spoilers, but it can't hurt to take that precaution. So spoilers ahead, just to be safe. With that in mind, let's get into it. So with Final Fantasy X, it actually operates very differently than Final Fantasy X in some ways. Um, I'll back up a little bit, explain what I mean, and then dive in further. Okay, so for me, right, like Final Fantasy is an interesting game or series because it's like you have different combat systems in each game, right? And it still feels like Final Fantasy. It's just like you'll get some differences with the type of combat and then the specific combat system. So, like over the years, we've had like straight up traditional turn based, but then we've also had like the ATB systems. We've had a little slightly different system in Final Fantasy X, which abandoned the ATB system that had been used for several games up until that point. Um, After the traditional sort of style of combat. And so we have like those sort of styles, and later we get like real time, and we get different variations of the real time combat. Like playing Final Fantasy 16, which is real time, feels differently than playing Final Fantasy 7, which is also real time, because you got these different styles of gameplay with different combat mechanics and different systems. And so I think that's all cool. And with Final Fantasy X too, the reason why I bring that up in the first place is because if you've played Final Fantasy X, you probably were expecting it to be the same. And we had no reference point at that time. Like it was like the first like main like sequel to a Final Fantasy game, like in terms of scale and scope. And so it's like, well, is it gonna be the same? It's like no, it's different. But I like the systems in Final Fantasy X, but also X too. Um, so if we start from the beginning, go from the basics, and then build ourselves up from there, I think we'll be fine. Sorry, my body's doing whatever it's doing, and I'm feeling that, and I'm sure that's impacting my voice and stuff. Um, but I digress. Okay, so on the base level, with Final Fantasy games, with other RPGs, and a lot of games in general, the idea is you're dishing out damage while trying to avoid taking it. And then to add to that, if you are going to take it, you're trying to reduce it, nullify it, or recover from it. Ideally, you're missing it entirely, right? But if you take it, it's like there's things you can do. So that already adds layers to it, right? And all that's just math, right? It's math that comes like across to you in a dynamic way. It's math nonetheless, because not only is there math happening, it is math. Um, so right, you're dealing with your health first and foremost. You're trying to stay at 100, or at the very least not get to zero. Like like starting at 100% and not trying to get to 0%. And then on the flip side, you're trying to take your opponents down to 0%. And so with this game, with Final Fantasy X too, and a lot of other games, you have that basic concept, and you're expanding from it, right? You have a base, and you expand. And so you have that first layer, right? And then you have things like I'm sorry, you have things like stats. And like with those stats, they impact how you're able to dish out that damage or what you can actually take, right? You have your HP, your MP, your strength, magic, and then magic attack, magic defense, defense, accuracy, evasion, stuff like that. and all that's like affecting your ability to hit and to like not be hit, or if you're going to be hit, take a hit. And it's all math. Like with stats, it's inherently like that. And then of course, there's more, right? So throughout the game, one of the big features of like the combat system for Final Fantasy X is the idea of dress spheres, and they changed like not only your weapons, but like your appearance as well as your base stats. They all have strengths, different weaknesses, and allow for different abilities. Oh, sorry, different strengths, different weaknesses, and allow for different abilities. And as you go through combat, as you navigate the story and go on side quests, you're gaining ability points, and so you can power up um, the dress spheres, right? And so with the dress spheres, to like kind of relate it to Final Fantasy on that larger set, it's a job system, right? Like job system, class system, whatever you want to call it. The idea that you're having these characters that can take on these roles that come with different stats and different abilities, it's not uncommon. Up until that point, you saw it in a major way with the first Final Fantasy 3, and Final Fantasy 5. You can make an argument about some of the other games that is kind of low key there, but in terms of it being like front and center, um, you have those like earlier Final Fantasy games, and then you didn't really see it for a while. And each time, the series returned to it in that more structured way, that more direct way, it expanded. And I think like with Final Fantasy X-2, it's no different here. So when you look at that job system, it's like taking all the things that like were before and like refining them. There's a lot of jobs in this game that you can have, like a lot of dress spheres, and they change what you can do, right? Some, you know, might make you better at physical attacks, or some might make you better at offensive spells, some might make you better healers, some might allow you to fire at a distance, stuff like that. So you have different ways that your attacks can be issued out, and then you have your stats as a whole that are impacted by things, and so you get all these different abilities, all these different stats, and so you work on your job system and you can perfect them. And I think what's interesting about it here is like so. And you see like this progression over time, right? Like you got the idea of like, oh well, you have like the first Final Fantasy, right? It's like, hey, you have these like four warriors of light, you have their jobs, and you're doing a thing, and then you can get more jobs as you go on. That you can switch them out, right? And that gets more elaborate in 3, and then that gets more elaborate in 5, and you get a lot of choice, a lot of options. But you couldn't really like switch in the middle of combat. That's not the case here for Final Fantasy X-2. Like so you have the idea that you have like garment grids, and the garment grids, garment grids, contain a certain amount of dress spheres that you can take into battle, and you can switch on the fly. The thing is that is going to take a turn from you, but it might be worth it if you want to give different jobs to different characters in the middle of a battle for like a strategic benefit. And there's math in all of that. There's math in like the spheres themselves, collecting them and what they do and how you use and strategize in battle. Because again, like they come out with different stat boost, different abilities, and so you can really like mix and match and customize it. You can collect the spheres, and so it's really cool because it's like you're growing, your characters are growing, and in this game, like you're playing as Yuna, Riku, and newcomer Pain. I would have personally preferred Lulu in that role. She does appear in the game. She just doesn't fight with them. But Pain's okay. So in any case, you play as these three ladies throughout the course of the game, and you can collect the different dress spheres. You can mix and match. You can grow. You can use your ability points how you want to, and there's math and all of that. And not only just that system as a whole, but there's the idea that here we return to the ATB system, the active time battle system. And so with that, it's like, okay, you have your gauge, and it's building up, and it determines how quickly you can attack, how quickly you can dish out that damage. Because if you're not attacking and it's still like filling, but your opponent feels faster, then they can dish out their attack quicker. So you have the turn-based element, but it has that twist on it, and that's been something that's been a big part of Final Fantasy history for a long time. Before Final Fantasy X took a break, you had it first introduced in 4. You see it in 6, 7, and 8, and 9. I think 5-2. I think it's just like, yeah, those 6 games back to back, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 switched it up and went back to more of an old system, more of a traditional turn-based system, but they did have a slight twist. Um, but with Final Fantasy 10-2, it returned to that ATB system, and there's math in that too. Math in the game itself, but what it allows you to do, and it's impacted by your stats. It's impacted by your jobs, and so there's that to consider. Then there's also like different stats, different status ailments and that you can inflict or avoid. And all of that adds up to a very mathematical experience that's coming at you in a very colorful way. Um, yeah, so not only is there math in that base level in terms of the gameplay, but you got to figure you're gaining different items in addition to like the dress spheres, right? And you're practicing resource management as you go, right? And there's math in that too, and math in the world design, math in the programming, math in the money, math in the marketing, and also like we don't really talk about it here that much when I'm talking about games. Um, well, I mean, okay, so like I do talk about character design, but I don't really talk about fashion that much. And in a game like Final Fantasy X-2, it is all over that. And there's math in that too, math in designing each of those outfits, and math in the character designs overall, and the world and how it's structured, the scale, the scope of it all, and how everything functions and flows, not just combat, but the way you move throughout the game. Um, there's math in all of these things and more. And with that in mind, I want to switch it over and talk about my opinions on the story and the characters. Okay, so for the characters, for the most part, or at least for the people we follow, they're decent. Yuna, in particular, like she was a blast. I liked her in Final Fantasy X, and I liked her in Final Fantasy X too. Riku, she's fun in both cases. Riku is Riku. Pain, like I said, she's okay. I would have preferred more Lulu, but Pain is okay. With Lulu, she does appear in the game. Same with Waka. They're like married and having a kid. It's like, jeez. I'm not a Waka fan, by the way. Because like there was some crazy stuff in Final Fantasy X where like he was pretty racist, and that like never gets addressed fully, or at least like not as heavily as it could. But like him and Lulu still end up together, so it's like, man. In any case, like they appear and some other characters. We have some newcomers as well, which the newcomers, because you have like LeBlanc and her group and all that, and they're just okay. So as far as um, the story, it's like I feel like okay, so Final Fantasy X-2 can be like divisive, and I think some of that. Well, I mean, there's a bunch of reasons for it, but one of them is I think the story. Like for some people, it's not going to grab them, or it's like too different than Final Fantasy X was. For me, it was okay. I didn't mind progressing through it, but like I wasn't like on the edge of my seat. I liked more like the characters and their interactions and the story. But one of the things I did like about like the story though, because like in terms of like plot development and stuff like that, I'm like okay, but I like that it was fun. It was like pretty camp, which that's probably not gonna win some people over, but like they were clearly having fun, and like Yuna's clearly having a blast and stepping into her own, and like again like I like Yuna in Final Fantasy X, but also like they're in Final Fantasy X too. There's some people out there that do think it's a bad game, and I think it's a very weird opinion. I think it's a pretty cool game because it's very involved. Just with the combat system alone, it's very like cool because it's just taking that job system and expanding it in some fun and new ways. A lot of customization options. So like for me, I like the characters. I like the fun elements of the story. I thought parts of it were just okay, and I really like the combat system. Overall, I think they did a great job, and I feel like Final Fantasy X-2 does not get the credit that it deserves. I very much enjoyed Final Fantasy X, but I very much enjoyed Final Fantasy X 2. Two. See what I did there? That was bad. I enjoyed it as well. But yeah, so that's largely what I have to say about Final Fantasy X-2 in this video. It's a fun game. If you haven't tried it, you should give it a chance. It has a lot to offer in terms of the combat, and a lot of it's just straight up fun. Okay? I'll see you in the next one.